My name is Narissa, and at 32 years old, I've poured my heart and soul into Hartwell's Bakery since I was 15. After 4 years at culinary school in Paris, I returned home bursting with ideas to elevate our family business. But that morning, shuffling through papers, accidentally left on the copier, my world shattered. The ownership transfer documents named my sister Jessica as the sole inheritor. When confronted, my mother simply said, "Jessica has vision. Let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if family business drama hits close to home." Hartwell's Bakery wasn't just a business to me, it was my heritage, my identity. My grandparents opened the bakery in 1965 in a charming brick building on Maple Street in Portland, Maine. The story of how they started with just one oven, and my grandmother's collection of handwritten recipes was something I grew up hearing at every family gathering. Their determination through those early years created something special that became an institution in our community. Some of my earliest memories are of sitting on a flour-dusted countertop, watching my grandfather fold delicate layers of pastry dough. The bakery's scent butter vanilla and warm bread was the perfume of my childhood. While other kids had playgrounds and movie theaters, I had industrial mixers and cooling racks as my playground. By age 8, I could perfectly crack eggs one-handed and knew exactly how long to whip meringue to get those stiff, glossy peaks. My grandfather would smile and say, "This one has the touch," whenever I helped him. It wasn't just flattery, I did have a natural talent for pastry. The precision and creativity it required spoke to something fundamental in my personality. Throughout elementary and middle school, I would rush to the bakery after classes. My homework was often completed at the small desk in the back office, the sounds of the kitchen providing a comforting soundtrack. While my friends were having sleepovers or going to the mall, I was learning the proper technique for laminating croissant dough or how to temper chocolate without it seizing. High school brought more responsibilities. I officially started working weekends and summers at 15, gradually taking on more duties until I was practically the assistant manager by 18. I missed junior prom to help prepare for a major wedding order. The homecoming football game my senior year, I was perfecting a new line of French macarons for a charity event the bakery was catering. These weren't sacrifices in my mind, they were investments in my future. My parents, Franklin and Diane Hartwell, took over day-to-day operations when my grandparents semi-retired to Florida. Dad handled the business side while Mom managed the front of house. They trusted me with increasingly important responsibilities. And we all understood, though it was never explicitly stated, that I would eventually take the helm. My sister Jessica, 5 years younger than me, couldn't have been more different. Where I was flour and sugar, she was fashion magazines and marketing textbooks. She rarely set foot in the bakery except to grab a free cookie on her way to meet friends. When family dinner conversations turned to the day's bakery events, Jessica would steer the topic toward her latest social media obsession or campus activity. I never begrudged her this, we all have different passions, and I was happy she was finding her path. When I announced my plan to attend culinary school in Paris, my parents were supportive. "Bring back some French magic to Maine," my father said. The prestigious program was competitive, but my practical experience gave me an edge over applicants who had only worked in classroom kitchens. It would mean 4 years away from the bakery, but we all saw it as an investment in Hartwell's future. Those years in Paris were transformative. I studied under pastry chefs whose names were spoken with reverence in culinary circles. I learned techniques that had been perfected over centuries and discovered innovative approaches that were revolutionizing the industry. Between classes and apprenticeships, I filled notebooks with ideas for Hartwell's ways to honor our traditional offerings while bringing in new inspirations. Every Sunday night without fail, I video called my parents to discuss bakery operations. They shared the week's challenges and successes, and I offered suggestions based on what I was learning. "We're keeping your spot warm," Mom would say. I'd respond by showing them my latest creation or describing a technique I was mastering. These conversations reinforced my connection to home and my place in the family business. The financial investment in my education wasn't small, and I worked part-time at a local patisserie to help offset costs. My parents contributed significantly as well, which I understood as further confirmation of their intention for me to lead Hartwell's into its next chapter. "Consider it an investment in the bakery's future," Dad said when they transferred money for my tuition. During my final semester, I compiled a comprehensive business plan for Hartwell's that balanced tradition and innovation. I researched equipment upgrades that would improve efficiency without compromising quality. I developed recipes that would introduce our loyal customers to new flavors while maintaining the nostalgic items they loved. I even drafted marketing strategies that would help us compete with the trendy new bakeries popping up around Portland. Graduation approached, and my excitement to return home and implement my ideas grew. In our video calls, my parents seemed enthusiastic about my plans, though, in retrospect, their responses had become increasingly vague. "We'll discuss everything when you're back," they'd say, or "things are changing here too." I attributed their evasiveness to being busy or wanting to surprise me with improvements they'd made. What I didn't know then was that while I was mastering the art of French pastry, the foundation of my future was being quietly dismantled back home. The day I returned to Portland was filled with emotion. After 4 years of intense training and being an ocean away from my family, stepping off that plane felt like the beginning of the next chapter of my life. I had graduated with honors, earned recommendations from renowned chefs, and carried a suitcase full of notebooks containing ideas that would revitalize our family bakery. The future I had worked toward my entire life was finally within reach. My parents and Jessica met me at the airport, holding a hand-painted banner that read, "Welcome home, pastry chef." The drive from the airport was filled with updates about neighbors, staff, and regular customers. Jessica chatted about changes in the neighborhood, while my parents asked about my flight and final weeks in Paris. No one mentioned the bakery in detail, which struck me as odd, but didn't raise immediate alarm bells. "We're having a little welcome home gathering at the bakery tonight," Mom said as we neared home. "Just staff and some regulars who've missed you." The bakery looked different when we pulled up a fresh coat of paint, new signage with a modernized logo, flower boxes beneath the windows. Changes that hadn't been mentioned in our weekly calls. "Surprise," Dad said, noticing my expression. "Jessica helped design the new look. What do you think?" "It's different," I managed, trying to hide my disappointment at not being consulted. "When did this happen?" "About 2 months ago." Jessica jumped in. "The Instagram engagement has been amazing since the refresh." Instagram engagement. Since when was Jessica involved in the bakery's marketing? I pushed the thought aside as we entered where a small crowd of employees and loyal customers welcomed me with applause and hugs. Looking around, I noticed more changes inside. The display cases had been rearranged, and some featured pastries I didn't recognize more visually striking than our traditional offerings, with bright colors and artistic decorations. The menu board behind the counter had been redesigned with several of our staple items missing. Mrs. Abernathy, who'd been coming in every morning for 30 years, hugged me tight. "Thank goodness you're back," she whispered. "The new cinnamon rolls just aren't the same." Before I could respond, I was pulled into more greetings and conversations. Throughout the evening, I caught glimpses of interactions that unsettled me. Staff members I'd known for years deferring to Jessica about inventory questions. My parents showcasing the new direction of the bakery with Jessica standing prominently beside them. A corner of the shop had been converted into a social media station, with perfect lighting for photos. Most concerning was the office. When I slipped away to place my old apron in my desk drawer, I found the office completely redecorated. My desk had been replaced with a sleek workstation covered in marketing materials and mood boards. The wall that once held my culinary certificates now displayed framed social media posts and press mentions about the bakery's fresh approach. When I emerged, I found Jessica chatting with a young man I didn't recognize. "Narissa, this is Blake," she said, "our new social media manager. He's been helping us build our online presence." "Nice to meet you," I said, extending my hand. "I didn't realize we had a social media manager." "Going on 3 months now," Blake replied cheerfully. "Jessica's marketing plan required dedicated personnel." Jessica's marketing plan. I looked at my sister, who smiled brightly. "We can catch up on all the changes tomorrow," she said. "Tonight's about celebrating you." But as the evening continued, I noticed at least 4 other new employees, none of whom worked in the kitchen. All had been hired during my absence, all reported to Jessica, and all treated me with the polite distance of someone meeting their boss's relative, not a key figure in the business. The next morning, I arrived at the bakery early, eager to get back into the kitchen and reconnect with our bakers. I found myself blocked at the back door by a security keypad that hadn't existed when I left. Need the code. Jessica appeared behind me, coffee cup in hand. It's 3594. We installed it after a small break-in last year. Inside the kitchen was in full swing. Two bakers I didn't recognize were working alongside Marcos, our head baker for the last decade. Narissa. Marcos embraced me. Finally, the real pastry chef returns. Jessica cleared her throat. Ahem, Narissa. We have a staff meeting at 9 to discuss the summer menu. I've called everyone in. The meeting was held in our newly renovated break room. Jessica stood at the front with a tablet and portable projector, presenting a comprehensive rebranding strategy and menu overhaul. My parents sat nodding approvingly, while I struggled to hide my growing confusion and hurt. When Jessica finished her presentation, Dad turned to me. Narissa, why don't you share some of your ideas from Paris? I hadn't prepared a formal presentation expecting to ease back into operations before proposing changes. Nevertheless, I enthusiastically shared some of my ideas for incorporating French techniques into our classic offerings. That sounds labor-intensive, Jessica interrupted. Our data shows customers want convenient Instagram-worthy options they can grab quickly. Data doesn't capture the experience of biting into a perfectly made pastry, I countered. But it does capture what brings people through the door, she replied. And that's my department now. The words hung in the air. Her department. I looked to my parents for clarification, but they averted their eyes. We've been trying some new approaches, Dad finally said. Jessica majored in business with a focus on digital marketing. She's been helping us modernize. And it's working, Jessica added. Revenue is up 17% since I implemented my strategy. I swallowed hard. That's great, but I thought we'd be discussing how to incorporate my culinary training into our offerings. That was the point of the investment in my education, wasn't it? An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Mom broke it with forced brightness. We'll find the right balance. Now, Narissa, why don't you spend the day reacquainting yourself with everything Jessica can show you the new systems? As the meeting dispersed, longtime employees gave me sympathetic glances. Outside the break room, Marcos whispered, Things have changed, Narissa. Not all for the better, if you ask me. The pastries look pretty for photos, but they don't taste like Hartwell's anymore. That afternoon, Jessica gave me a tour of the improved bakery operations, speaking as if I were a new hire, rather than someone who had spent their life in this business. Every change had been made without consulting me. Every new direction diverged from the bakery's traditional strengths, and my parents had apparently supported it all. When I finally got a moment alone with them that evening after closing, I asked directly, "What's going on? When did Jessica become so involved in the bakery?" She showed interest while you were away, Mom said. And she has such good ideas for reaching new customers. But what about all our discussions about me taking on a larger role when I returned? What about the investment in my culinary education? There's room for both your talents, Dad said vaguely. Jessica handles the business side and you can focus on the kitchen. That wasn't the plan, I insisted. Plans evolve, dear, Mom said, patting my hand. Let's see how things work with both of you bringing your different strengths to the table. I left that night with a growing sense of unease. The bakery I devoted my life to was changing in ways I hadn't approved, and my position within it seemed suddenly uncertain. The foundation I thought was solid had developed concerning cracks. The following weeks confirmed my worst fears. What had appeared as cracks in the foundation revealed themselves as a complete structural overhaul that had been carefully orchestrated during my absence. Each morning I arrived earlier than necessary, often beating the sunrise to reclaim my space in the kitchen. I'd flip on the lights, run my hands over the countertops, and breathe in the familiar scents, trying to reconnect with the bakery I remembered. The early hours became my sanctuary. Before Jessica arrived with her marketing team and their meetings about engagement metrics, I could bake the way I'd always known, with heart precision and respect for tradition. Marcos and the kitchen staff welcomed my input during these quiet hours, often confiding that they missed the old Hartwell's approach. Your croissants are still the best, Marcos told me one morning. Customers keep asking when your specials will be back on the menu. But as soon as Jessica arrived, the dynamic shifted. She'd sweep in around 9, tablet in hand, dressed immaculately, and trailing the scent of expensive perfume. The front-of-house staff immediately straightened up their relaxed demeanor, replaced by a performance-ready alertness that spoke volumes about Jessica's management style. "We need to move the display of those," she said one morning, pointing to a tray of my carefully crafted chocolate eclairs. "They're not photographing well in that light. Put the rainbow macarons there instead." "Those eclairs are made with a special technique I learned in Paris," I explained. "The chocolate has to be kept away from direct light, or it will bloom and affect the taste." Jessica sighed. "Narissa, people eat with their eyes first now. If it doesn't look good on Instagram, it doesn't sell. But the quality is secondary to visibility in today's market." She finished already typing something on her tablet. "Blake, make sure we get a time lapse of the macaron display being set up for today's post." I bit my tongue and returned to the kitchen, where at least I still had some autonomy. Or so I thought, until I discovered that Jessica had been gradually altering our recipes without informing me. It happened when Mrs. Abernathy came to the kitchen door, something she'd done for years when she wanted to chat directly with the bakers. "Nerissa, dear," she said, her voice lowered conspiratorially, "what happened to your grandmother's cinnamon roll recipe? They're just not the same." Confused, I assured her we were using the same recipe we always had. Later that morning, I checked our recipe book, the worn stained binder, that contained generations of Hartwell family recipes. The page for cinnamon rolls had been replaced with a typed laminated sheet that reduced the proofing time by half and substituted our traditional filling with a pre-made cinnamon spread. Furious, I confronted Jessica in her office, what used to be my office. "You changed Grandma's recipes without discussing it with anyone." Jessica looked up from her computer with casual indifference. "I streamlined several recipes to improve efficiency. The ingredients were expensive and the process too time-consuming. Those recipes are our heritage. They're what built this business." "Those recipes are from a different era," Jessica countered. "We've received great feedback on the changes. Sales are up, production is faster, and costs are down. It's just good business." "From whom?" "Not from customers like Mrs. Abernathy, who can tell the difference." "Mrs. Abernathy is one customer from the old demographic. We're targeting a broader audience now. People who want something that looks amazing in their social feeds, provides a quick sugar fix, and doesn't break the bank." "That's not what Hartwell's is about," I insisted. "It's what Hartwell's is becoming," she replied coolly. "And it's working. Revenue is up 23% this quarter. The business is thriving." "At what cost?" I asked. "Our reputation for quality, our identity." Jessica leaned back in her chair. "Look, Nerissa, I know you're passionate about the traditional approach, but times change. People want Instagram-worthy, not old-fashioned. They want convenient and photogenic, not labor-intensive and plain. So we just abandon everything that made us special, everything Grandma and Grandpa built." "We evolve," Jessica said firmly. "Or we get left behind. Mom and Dad understand that, which is why they've supported my changes." When I brought my concerns to our parents that evening, I expected them to at least acknowledge the importance of maintaining our quality standards. Instead, they sided completely with Jessica. "The numbers don't lie," Dad said, reviewing the sales reports Jessica had prepared. "These changes are good for business." "But they're changing the very soul of what we do," I argued. "We've always prided ourselves on quality over quantity, on creating something special, not just something sellable." "Honey," Mom said in that placating tone that made me feel like a child, "Jessica has brought us into the modern era. Before she stepped in, we were struggling to compete with those trendy new places downtown." "You never mentioned any struggles in our calls," I said, hurt by this revelation. "We didn't want to worry you while you were studying," Dad replied. "But yes, the business needed a fresh approach. Jessica saw that and stepped up." "And what about my role?" I asked. "Where do I fit into this new version of Hartwell's?" "You'll always have a place in the kitchen," Mom assured me. "Your skills are valuable even as we modernize. As an employee, but not a leader." I clarified, the realization stinging. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, but didn't deny it. The next morning, I overheard two newer staff members talking in the break room. "Jessica's really transformed this place," one said. "My friend applied to work here 2 years ago and said it was just an old-fashioned bakery nobody our age would visit." "I heard the sister just came back from Europe or something," the other replied. "She seems nice, but kind of stuck in the past with her ideas." "Well, Jessica's the future owner, so I guess her vision is what matters." Their conversation stopped abruptly when they noticed me in the doorway. But the damage was done. Future owner. Those words echoed in my head throughout the day. Was that what had been decided? Had I been completely removed from the succession plan while I was away, working to improve myself for the bakery's benefit? That evening, I called Taylor, my childhood friend, who had become a business attorney. We met for coffee away from the bakery, and I explained everything that had happened since my return. "Something doesn't add up," Taylor said after listening intently. "Did your parents ever explicitly tell you that Jessica would be taking over?" "No, they're being vague, but the staff seems to know something I don't." Taylor's expression grew serious. "Narissa, you need to find out if there's any paperwork. If they're planning an ownership transfer, there would be documents." "Where would I even look?" "Office files, emails, the copy machine," Taylor suggested. "People get careless with sensitive documents more often than you'd think." I didn't want to snoop, but my growing sense of betrayal overrode my hesitation. The next day, while Jessica was in a meeting with a social media influencer, and my parents were handling a catering consultation, I checked the office. Nothing in the file cabinet suggested any ownership changes. It was pure chance that I decided to check the paper tray of the copier. A document had been left behind forgotten after copying. As I pulled it out to place it on Jessica's desk, the heading caught my eye: Transfer of Business Ownership. My hands trembled as I read the first paragraph, which clearly outlined the transfer of Hartwell's Bakery from Franklin and Diane Hartwell to Jessica Hartwell, to be finalized on the 1st of the following month. My name appeared nowhere in the document. The room seemed to spin around me. Everything I had worked for, everything I had believed about my future, had been a lie. While I was overseas investing in skills to improve our family business, my place in that business had been given away. I made a copy of the document before returning the original to the copier tray, then left work early claiming a migraine. In reality, I needed space to process this betrayal and decide how to confront my family about what I discovered. That evening, I drove to my parents' house, with the copied documents tucked in my bag, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The familiar drive through Portland's tree-lined streets offered no comfort. The home that had always represented safety and love now loomed before me as the site of an imminent confrontation. I found my parents in the living room, Dad reading the newspaper, while Mom sorted through family photos for a scrapbooking project. The normalcy of the scene made what I was about to do even more difficult. "Narissa," Mom smiled. "This is a nice surprise. We weren't expecting you tonight." I couldn't manage pleasantries. Instead, I pulled out the copied documents and placed them on the coffee table between us. "I found these today," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm inside me. "Were you ever going to tell me, or just wait until it was finalized and present me with a fait accompli?" The color drained from my mother's face. Dad set down his newspaper, his expression a mixture of guilt and resignation. "You weren't supposed to find out this way," he finally said. How was I supposed to find out? After dedicating my entire life to Hartwell's. After spending 4 years in Paris specifically to bring new expertise back to the family business. "Honey, please try to understand," Mom began. "The bakery industry has changed dramatically while you were away. We needed to adapt. And I couldn't be part of that adaptation. Everything I learned, all my ideas for balancing tradition with innovation, none of that mattered." "Of course it mattered," Dad insisted. "But Jessica showed real initiative while you were gone. She came to us with comprehensive plans for modernization, marketing strategies, cost-cutting measures, which apparently included gutting Grandma's recipes and transforming Hartwell's into a generic Instagram bakery," I interrupted. "And neither of you thought to consult me, to include me in these decisions about the business that was supposed to be my future." My mother sighed. "Jessica has vision for the modern market, Narissa. She understands what today's customers want in a way that I don't." I finished her words, cutting deeper than she could know. "Because I care about quality and tradition alongside innovation. Because I believe our heritage matters." "It's not personal," Dad said weakly. "It's a business decision." "Not personal." I laughed bitterly. "You're handing the family legacy, my inheritance, my future to Jessica, who never showed any interest in the bakery until it became a convenient vehicle for her marketing career. How is that not personal?" The sound of the front door opening interrupted our conversation. Jessica walked in, dropping her designer bag on the entryway table. "Family meeting I wasn't invited to?" she asked lightly, then noticed the tension in the room and the documents on the table. Her expression shifted from surprise to something more guarded. "Oh, yes, I said. "Care to explain why the business I've dedicated my life to is being signed over to you?" Jessica crossed her arms defensively. "It's not like you weren't going to have a place there, Narissa. You can still be head baker or whatever title you want." "Head baker," I repeated incredulously. "I was supposed to inherit the business. That was always the plan." "Plans change." Jessica shrugged. "While you were off in Paris, I was here saving the business. Saving it from what Hartwell's has been successful for over 50 years. Saving it from becoming irrelevant," she countered. "From being another quaint, outdated bakery that couldn't compete with trendy new places. I brought us into the digital age, expanded our customer base, and increased revenue by nearly 25%. At the cost of everything that made Hartwell's special." "Girls, please," Mom interjected. "Let's discuss this calmly. How long have you known about this?" I asked Jessica directly. She hesitated just long enough for me to understand. "You've known for months, haven't you? While I was still in Paris, while I was calling home every week, sharing my ideas, planning my return." Jessica had the decency to look slightly ashamed. "Mom and Dad approached me about taking a larger role about 8 months ago. The formal ownership discussions started 3 months ago. While you were still telling me how excited you were for me to come home and implement my ideas," I said to my parents. "Were you ever planning to tell me the truth?" "Of course," Dad insisted. "We were waiting for the right time." "After the paperwork was finalized, you mean? When I couldn't do anything about it?" "Narissa, please try to understand," Mom pleaded. "Jessica's business degree and marketing skills are what the bakery needs now. The industry has changed. And my culinary degree from one of the most prestigious schools in the world, my lifetime of experience in that kitchen, my relationships with our customers and staff, none of that matters." "It matters," Dad said, "just not as much as Jessica's vision." I finished bitterly. "I heard that part loud and clear." Jessica stepped closer. "Look, this doesn't have to be a dramatic scene. You can still have an important role. We just need to modernize, and my skills are better suited to leading that charge." "Your skills," I repeated. "You mean your ability to make things look pretty on Instagram, even if they don't taste as good? Your talent for cutting corners on quality to improve the bottom line?" "That's not fair," Jessica protested. "I've made legitimate improvements to efficiency and market reach. While destroying everything that made Hartwell's worth visiting in the first place, our regular customers are already noticing the drop in quality. A few old-timers might complain, but we've gained hundreds of new customers who love our direction. Until the next trendy bakery opens and they move on." "What happens then, Jessica?" "When you've alienated our loyal customer base for fair-weather Instagram followers," Jessica's expression hardened. "You're just upset because you're not getting your way. You always thought you were entitled to the bakery because you were the one who wanted to play with flour since childhood." "Play with flour?" I was incredulous. "I've worked in that bakery since I was 15. I've given up school events, social opportunities, relationships, all for Hartwell's. While you were at parties and football games, I was learning every aspect of the business. And now you walk in with a marketing degree and some Instagram filters and think you deserve to own it." "I saved it," Jessica shouted. "While you were gone, sales were slipping. The business was stagnating. I brought it back from the brink with modern approaches you're too stubborn to understand." Tears burned in my eyes. "If there were problems, you should have told me. We could have worked together instead of you orchestrating this behind my back." "We did what we thought was best for the bakery's future," Dad said quietly. I looked at each of their faces. Dad's guilty but resolved expression. Mom's pleading eyes, Jessica's defensive stance. The family I thought I knew had made decisions that altered my entire future without my knowledge or consent. "I need some air," I said, finally grabbing my bag and the copied documents. "Narissa, please," Mom called after me. "Let's talk this through." But I was already out the door, tears streaming down my face as I rushed to my car. The betrayal was too fresh, too complete to process in their presence. As I drove away from my childhood home, I felt as though I was also driving away from the future I had spent my entire life preparing for. The week that followed was the darkest of my life. I called in sick to the bakery, unable to face the place that had been the center of my world, but now represented profound betrayal. I stayed in my small apartment with the curtains drawn, alternating between tears, anger, and a pervasive numbness that made even simple tasks feel impossible. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications, concerned texts from longtime bakery employees who had noticed my absence, voicemails from my parents, their tones shifting from worried to frustrated as days passed, multiple missed calls from Taylor offering legal advice if I wanted it. I responded to none of them. On the fourth day, a text came from Jessica. The schedule for next week needs to be finalized. When should I put you down to resume normal work hours? The clinical professionalism of her message, with no acknowledgement of the family crisis unfolding, sparked a fresh wave of anger. She was already operating as the owner, expecting me to fall in line as an employee. I threw my phone across the room, where it bounced off the couch and onto the floor. By the sixth day, when my apartment had become a nest of unwashed dishes and takeout containers, Taylor used her spare key to let herself in. She took one look at me, unwashed hair sweatpants I'd been wearing for days, empty ice cream containers on the coffee table, and opened all the curtains and windows. "Enough wallowing," she said firmly. "We need to talk about your options." "What options?" I asked hoarsely, my voice rough from disuse. "They've made their decision. The bakery is Jessica's." "Not until those papers are signed and filed," Taylor pointed out, gathering dirty dishes as she spoke. "And even then, there might be grounds to contest it, especially if there was any prior verbal agreement about succession." "It wasn't verbal," I admitted. "Just understood. Everyone always knew I would take over someday." Taylor sat beside me on the couch. "Have you considered that maybe you don't need Hartwell's anymore? You have world-class training now. You could start your own place." "With what money?" I laughed bitterly. "Everything I had went into my education, which was supposed to be an investment in my future at Hartwell's. There are investors, small business loans, crowdfunding." Taylor began listing options, but I was barely listening. My entire identity had been wrapped up in Hartwell's Bakery. Every decision I had made since childhood had been with the bakery in mind. Every sacrifice had been justified by the promise of eventually leading the family business. Without that future, who was I? What was the point of all those years of dedication? Depression settled over me like a heavy blanket, making it difficult to imagine any future at all. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, mentally replaying every conversation with my parents over the past 4 years, looking for signs I had missed, hints of their duplicity. Had they already been planning this transfer when they sent me off to Paris with proud smiles and promises about the bakery's future? Had the investment in my education been a consolation prize, a way to get me out of the way while Jessica implemented her changes? On the 10th day of my self-imposed isolation, an unexpected knock came at my door. When I peered through the peephole, I was shocked to see my grandfather, who was supposed to be enjoying retirement in Florida. "Grandpa?" I opened the door, suddenly conscious of my disheveled appearance. "What are you doing here?" He took one look at me and pulled me into a tight hug. "Your friend Taylor tracked me down. Thought I should know what was happening." I broke down in his arms, sobbing like a child. This man had been my first mentor, the one who had recognized and nurtured my passion for baking. If anyone understood what Hartwell's meant to me, it was him. Inside my apartment, I made us coffee while Grandpa surveyed the chaos of my living space with concern, but no judgment. "Tell me everything," he said simply. For the next hour, I poured out the whole story: my return from Paris, the gradual discovery of Jessica's new role, finding the ownership transfer documents, the confrontation with my parents. Grandpa listened without interruption, his weathered baker's hands occasionally clenching into fists as my tale unfolded. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, then said, "They never told me about any of this." "What?" I was stunned. "Your parents. They never mentioned giving the bakery to Jessica. In fact, the last conversation I had with your father about succession about a year ago, he specifically mentioned how your Paris training would position you to take Hartwell's to the next level." A fresh wave of betrayal washed over me. "So they lied to you too?" Grandpa nodded, his expression hardening. "I built that bakery from nothing. Your grandmother and I worked 17-hour days for years to establish our reputation for quality. When your parents took over, they promised to maintain those standards. Jessica has changed everything, I said bitterly. The recipes, the ingredients, the entire philosophy of the business. I've been looking at the social media, Grandpa admitted. Fancy pictures of colorful pastries. But a bakery isn't about pretty pictures. It's about creating something that brings joy when you taste it. He reached for my hand across the table. This isn't right, Narissa. And I'm not going to stand by while everything your grandmother and I built is handed to someone who doesn't understand what makes a bakery special. For the first time in days, I felt a spark of something other than despair. What can we do? First, Grandpa said decisively, you're going to shower and change. Then we're going to get some real food into you. After that, we're going to sit down and make a plan. That afternoon, over a proper meal at my favorite cafe, Grandpa and I began strategizing. He had brought several documents from his files in Florida, the original business plan for Hartwell's copies of the succession agreement when my parents took over, and a letter he had written years ago, expressing his wishes for the bakery's future, which explicitly named me as the intended next-generation owner. I never formally filed this, he explained, tapping the letter, because I thought everyone understood it was always meant to be yours. But it's dated and notarized, which gives it some weight. We discussed various options, legal challenges, negotiation strategies, even the possibility of starting a competing bakery. Each had its merits and drawbacks. Before we decide anything, Grandpa said, you need to have one more conversation with your parents and Jessica. But this time, you'll be prepared calm and armed with facts instead of just emotion. Over the next 2 days, we researched and prepared. I gathered reviews showing quality complaints since Jessica's changes had been implemented. I created a comprehensive business plan that would honor Hartwell's traditions while incorporating sustainable modernizations. Grandpa reached out to several longtime suppliers who confirmed that ingredient quality had been downgraded under Jessica's cost-cutting measures. When I felt ready, I texted my parents and Jessica requesting a formal meeting at the bakery after hours. I want to discuss the future of Hartwell's in a professional setting, I wrote. No emotional outbursts, just business. They agreed, perhaps relieved that I was finally breaking my silence. As Grandpa drove me to the bakery for the confrontation that would determine my future, I felt a strange calm. Whatever happened, I would no longer be operating under illusions or false promises. The truth would be on the table, and I would stand up for the bakery I loved and the future I deserved. The bakery was eerily quiet when we arrived after closing time. The space that had always brought me comfort now felt like a battleground. My parents and Jessica were already seated at a table in the dining area, their faces showing varying degrees of surprise when my grandfather walked in behind me. Dad, my father stood clearly shocked. We didn't know you were in town. Clearly, there's a lot you haven't told me, Grandpa replied coolly, taking a seat beside me. Jessica's face had lost some of its confidence. She hadn't expected this alliance, and her eyes darted between Grandpa and me with new wariness. I asked for this meeting to discuss the future of Hartwell's Bakery in a professional capacity. I began opening a folder of documents I had prepared. I want to start by acknowledging that the bakery needs to evolve to stay competitive. On that point, Jessica and I agree. My sister looked surprised at this concession. However, I continued, I believe we fundamentally disagree on how that evolution should happen and what the core identity of Hartwell should be moving forward. I distributed copies of my business analysis to each of them. In the past 3 months, social media engagement and new customer visits have increased dramatically, I acknowledged. However, reviews from long-term customers show a 28% decrease in satisfaction, primarily citing declining quality and deviation from traditional offerings. Jessica immediately went on the defensive. New customers outnumber the ones complaining. The numbers don't lie, revenue is up significantly. Short-term revenue increases at the expense of quality and reputation rarely translate to long-term success, I countered calmly. I've included market analysis showing that bakeries that maintain high-quality standards while selectively modernizing outperform those that prioritize trends over substance in the 5-year outlook. My father reviewed the data with a frown. These are compelling points, Narissa. but Jessica has already implemented significant changes that are showing positive results. Implementing changes is different from determining the bakery's future direction as its owner, I said. Which brings me to the main issue. I placed the notarized letter from my grandfather on the table. This document, written when I was 16, clearly states Grandpa's intention for me to eventually take ownership of Hartwell's following my demonstrated commitment and appropriate training. My mother's face paled as she read it. "Frank, we never saw this." "I assumed it wasn't necessary to formalize what everyone already knew," Grandpa said. "Narissa has been the obvious successor since she was a child. It's why we encouraged her talent, why you sent her to culinary school in Paris." "Things changed," Jessica insisted. "The bakery needed different skills to survive in today's market." "Which is why I'm proposing a compromise," I said, revealing my comprehensive business plan. "A co-ownership structure where Jessica manages marketing and business development, and I oversee operations and product quality. Each of us would have clear domains of authority, while major decisions require mutual agreement." My parents exchanged glances, looking momentarily hopeful about this potential resolution. But Jessica shook her head. "The transfer papers are already drawn up. Legally, the decision is made." "Not finalized," I corrected. "And those papers could be revised to reflect a partnership rather than a complete transfer." "That's not what I agreed to," Jessica said firmly. "What you agreed to happened behind my back without my knowledge, despite my lifetime of commitment to this business," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my rising anger. "You didn't even work here until I was away." "Because you were always the favorite," Jessica suddenly burst out, her composed facade cracking. "It was always Narissa's so talented, and Narissa's gonna take over someday. The bakery was your thing, your special connection with Mom and Dad and Grandpa. I never had a chance to be part of it." The raw emotion in her voice took me by surprise. Was that what this was about, jealousy? "You never showed any interest," I said more softly. "If you had wanted to learn to be involved, would you have made room for me?" she challenged. "Or would I always have been in the shadow of perfect Narissa, the natural baker, the chosen one?" My parents looked uncomfortable, suggesting there was some truth to Jessica's perspective that I had never considered. "This isn't about childhood rivalries," Grandpa interjected firmly. "This is about who has the knowledge, experience, and vision to lead Hartwell's while honoring its legacy." "My vision has already increased profits," Jessica insisted. "At what cost?" I asked, sliding over a stack of recent customer reviews. "Have you read what our loyal customers are saying about how the cinnamon rolls don't taste the same? How the croissants aren't as flaky? How the service feels corporate instead of family-run? Some adaptation period is expected with any change," my father said defensively. "It's been 3 months," I pointed out. "These aren't adjustment complaints, they're fundamental quality issues." "If we stayed with your outdated approach, we'd be out of business within a year," Jessica argued. "That's simply not true," I countered, presenting my financial projections. "My plan incorporates social media and modern marketing. I'm not against those things. But it balances them with quality standards that have built our reputation for over 50 years." As the discussion continued, it became clear that Jessica was unwilling to consider any compromise that diminished her control. My parents, caught between us, seemed increasingly uncomfortable, but unwilling to revise their decision. "The papers are drawn up," my mother finally said with finality. "We believe this is the right direction for the bakery's future." I looked at each of them, these people I had trusted implicitly my entire life, and made my decision. "Then I'll make this simple for you," I said, standing up. "If Jessica takes sole ownership of Hartwell's, I walk away completely along with my recipes." "Your recipes," Jessica scoffed. "They're family recipes. They belong to the bakery." "Not all of them," I replied calmly. "The chocolate hazelnut tort that won the regional baking competition, mine. The lavender honey scones that food critics have written about, mine. The seasonal fruit galettes that sell out every weekend, also mine. I've created over 30 signature items during my time at Hartwell's, and I've documented their development in my personal notebooks." My father looked alarmed. "Narissa, you can't just take those recipes." "Actually, she can." Grandpa supported me. "Unless there's a specific work-for-hire agreement, which there isn't, recipes created by an individual remain their intellectual property." Jessica's confident demeanor faltered slightly. Customers come for the Hartwell name, not specific recipes. Are you willing to test that theory? I asked. Because I'm prepared to. Either we find a compromise that respects my lifelong contribution to this business, or I'll take my training, my expertise, and my recipes elsewhere. The ultimatum hung in the air. My heart was pounding, but outwardly I maintained the calm, professional demeanor I had practiced with Grandpa. Jessica stared at me for a long moment, then stood abruptly. I don't respond well to threats. The bakery can succeed without you or your precious recipes. Her words revealed more than she intended. This wasn't about saving the business or modernizing for survival. This was about Jessica wanting to win to prove she could succeed in my domain. Then I wish you luck, I said, gathering my documents. I'll clear out my personal items tomorrow. Narissa, please, my mother began, but I held up my hand to stop her. I've made my position clear. The choice is yours now. As Grandpa and I walked toward the door, Jessica called after me. You know why I really did this? Because for once in our lives, I wanted to be the successful daughter, the one they were proud of, the special one. I turned to look at my sister, suddenly seeing our relationship with new clarity. While I had been oblivious to her resentment focused on my passion for baking, she had been nursing a competitive wound, waiting for her chance to overshadow me. This was never a competition, Jessica, I said softly. There was always room for both of us to contribute our different strengths. You just never asked for your place. You decided to take mine instead. With those words, I walked out of Hartwell's bakery uncertain of my future, but surprisingly unburdened. For the first time since returning from Paris, I felt in control of my own story. The weeks following my ultimatum were both terrifying and liberating. I had walked away from everything familiar from the future I had planned, from the safety net of family business. My apartment became command central for what Taylor jokingly called Operation Phoenix Rising, my effort to build something new from the ashes of my former plans. 3 days after that final meeting, I received a brief email from my father. The ownership transfer to Jessica will proceed as planned. Your position in the kitchen remains open if you reconsider. No apology, no acknowledgement of my feelings or contributions, just the cold finality of their decision. I didn't respond. Instead, I threw myself into planning my next steps. The first breakthrough came unexpectedly through a Facebook message from Andrew Levin, a classmate from culinary school in Paris. He had recently moved to Portland to be closer to family and was looking to invest in a local food business. I remember your incredible pastries, he wrote. If you're ever interested in starting your own place, I'd love to discuss partnership opportunities. We met for coffee the following day. Andrew had inherited money from his grandfather and was eager to put it into a business that aligned with his passion for artisanal food. As I shared my situation and vision for what a bakery could be, his enthusiasm grew. This is exactly the kind of venture I've been looking for, he said, authentic, quality-focused, with real culinary expertise behind it. How soon can we start looking at locations? It was happening faster than I had imagined. Within 2 weeks, we had a business plan, financial projections, and a short list of potential locations. Andrew would handle the business side, while I would have complete creative control over the menu and kitchen operations. We agreed on a 60-40 ownership split in my favor, with clearly defined roles that played to our respective strengths. The next surprise came when Marcos Hartwell's head baker for over a decade called me. Things are falling apart without you, he said bluntly. Jessica's hired some culinary school graduate who's never worked in a real bakery before. Quality control is non-existent. When you get your new place up and running, I want to come work for you. By the end of the month, 3 more longtime Hartwell's employees had contacted me with similar messages. It seemed Jessica's management style was alienating the experienced staff who had been the backbone of the bakery's operations for years. Just as we were finalizing the lease on a charming storefront space in an up-and-coming neighborhood, Grandpa made an announcement that brought tears to my eyes. I'm investing in your new bakery, he said. Your grandmother and I always kept a separate savings account, our just-in-case fund. We intended it for retirement emergencies, but I can't think of a better use than helping you build something that truly honors our family's baking traditions. His financial contribution meant we could afford better equipment and more extensive renovations to the space. Beyond the money, his endorsement was a powerful affirmation that I was on the right path. The following months were a blur of activity overseeing renovations, developing recipes, sourcing suppliers, designing branding, and navigating the maze of permits and licenses required for a new food business. Every day brought new challenges and decisions. But unlike my final months at Hartwell's, these were challenges I faced on my own terms with partners who respected my expertise. I named the new bakery Narissa's Patisserie, embracing my identity and expertise rather than hiding behind a family name. The concept would combine classic French techniques with New England flavors and traditions, a perfect reflection of my training and heritage. Our tagline, Tradition Reimagined, subtly acknowledged my history while emphasizing our forward-looking approach. As opening day approached, anxiety and excitement battled for dominance. Would customers find us? Would they appreciate our commitment to quality over Instagram aesthetics? Had I made a catastrophic mistake in walking away from the security of an established business? Those questions were answered emphatically on our opening morning when we arrived 2 hours before opening time to find a line already forming around the block. Word had spread through Portland's food community, aided by a glowing preview article in the local paper highlighting my background and the story behind the new bakery. Former Hartwell's baker brings Paris training home. The headline read, diplomatically avoiding any mention of family drama while emphasizing my credentials. By noon, we had sold out of nearly everything. Customers raved about the perfect lamination of our croissants, the complex flavors of our signature chocolate hazelnut torte, and the warm personal service that made them feel genuinely welcomed. In the weeks that followed, our success continued to build. Food bloggers posted rave reviews. A regional magazine included us in their must-visit list. Most significantly, many longtime Hartwell's customers began making the trek to our location, often commenting on how the pastries reminded them of the way Hartwell's used to be. Meanwhile, reports from former colleagues suggested that Hartwell's was struggling with consistency issues. Jessica's marketing efforts continued to draw first-time visitors, but repeat business was declining. Her cost-cutting measures had led to noticeable quality drops that even Instagram filters couldn't disguise. 6 months after our opening, I received a surprising email from Jessica. "We should talk about a potential collaboration," she wrote. "The market is challenging for independent bakeries. A merger of our businesses could be mutually beneficial." I understood the subtext immediately. Hartwell's was in trouble, and Jessica was looking for a lifeline. Part of me felt vindicated my predictions about sacrificing quality for short-term gains had proven correct. But another part felt only sadness for the struggling business that had been my home for so long. My reply was polite but firm. "I'm not interested in a merger, but I'm always open to maintaining professional courtesy between our businesses. Portland is big enough for both of us to succeed if we each stay true to our unique strengths." A week later, I was surprised to see my parents enter the bakery during a quiet afternoon lull. They looked around with obvious admiration at what I had built, the warm, inviting space with its perfect balance of traditional and modern elements, the display cases filled with exquisite pastries, the wall featuring our press mentions and customer testimonials. "This is really something, Narissa," my father said, his voice carrying a note of regret. "You've created a beautiful business. We're so proud of what you've accomplished." My mother added, her eyes moist. The praise felt bittersweet. "Thank you," I said simply, unsure how to navigate this unexpected moment. "We made a mistake," Dad admitted after an awkward silence. "With Hartwell's. With you. We thought we were making a business decision, but we didn't consider what it would do to our family. Or to the bakery itself," Mom added quietly. "Things haven't been the same without you." I wasn't ready to fully forgive, but I was ready to begin healing. "Would you like to try our signature pastries?" I offered. "The lavender honey scone just came out of the oven." That simple offer, sharing my creations with them as customers, rather than family, became the first step in rebuilding our relationship. It would take time and many more conversations to address the hurt and betrayal, but that afternoon opened a door that had seemed permanently closed. A year after opening Narissa's Patisserie, I stood in my kitchen classroom at the back of the shop, teaching a weekend baking class to 8 enthusiastic students. Through the open doorway, I could see the busy main shop where Marcos expertly handled the Saturday morning rush with 2 younger bakers I'd trained. In many ways, what happened with my family and Hartwell's had been the push I needed to create something truly my own. The bakery I had built reflected my values and vision in a way that staying at Hartwell's might never have allowed. Here, tradition and innovation weren't competing forces, but complementary strengths. Quality wasn't sacrificed for aesthetics, but enhanced by thoughtful presentation. As I guided my students through the process of laminating dough for croissants, I realized I had found a peace I hadn't thought possible in the dark days after discovering my parents' betrayal. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something constructive, a determination to prove my worth not through family inheritance, but through creating something authentic and meaningful on my own terms. The key to perfect lamination, I told my students, isn't just in the technique, but in the patience. Rushing the process might seem efficient, but it ultimately undermines everything you're working to create. It was true of pastry, and it was true of life. Sometimes the paths we think we're meant to follow close unexpectedly, forcing us to forge new ones. The journey may be harder, lonelier, and more frightening than we anticipated. But if we stay true to our core values, our personal ingredients, the result can be even more satisfying than what we originally envisioned. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led you to something better? Or found yourself having to completely reimagine your future when your plans fell apart? Share your story in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey of rediscovery and reinvention, please subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that. Sometimes our greatest setbacks lead to our most authentic successes. Thank you for joining me today, and remember, in baking and in life, quality and authenticity always rise to the top.